So welcome back, everyone. This is a discussion of Pathogen Group number 2. I hope you got a chance to take a look at the lecture on viruses, because that will make the content of this pathogen group a lot easier to understand. This pathogen group has 8 important viruses in it, and we'll start here with a real killer, smallpox. Smallpox killed many millions of people, and over the centuries was a very dreaded disease, but has not been eradicated from Earth. In 1977 was the last recorded case, and that's due to a vaccination program, very successful vaccination program. The virus is held still in some labs for whatever reason. It's kind of scary to think about that. It's still around, but the last case was in 1977. So let's take a look at this virus. It's the variola virus. It contains double-stranded DNA with an envelope. The reservoir is humans only, and there is an effective vaccine. In fact, it was so effective that this disease has disappeared, and people are not even vaccinated anymore these days. So the effective vaccine is for the vaccinia virus, or manufactured with this vaccinia virus. You might know the story about Edward Jenner, who discovered that milkmaids who were exposed to cowpox were resistant to getting smallpox. And so he took this idea and figured out that if you have exposure to a very similar virus, that that you develop this resistance to the actual disease-causing virus. So there was, after the vaccination was worked out, there was an intensive immunization program. There's also something called herd immunity that sometimes you hear about these days. If enough people are vaccinated, that means the virus can't really spread. And that was what a lot of the anti-vaxxers kind of relying on, herd immunity. They figure that if enough people are vaccinated, then I don't have to be vaccinated because the virus is not going to be able to spread so easily. That's true, but if there's enough anti-vaxxers, then that becomes a problem again too. There are other viruses where very successful vaccination programs have pretty much eradicated the disease. In that category will be polio, for example. That one you hardly see, and especially in the United States, so you don't see that disease anymore. And then measles, that was one of those diseases that virtually disappeared with vaccination programs. But then the anti-vaxxers who promote their strange notion that vaccination is not good for you, they cause so many people to be scared of vaccination that the effect of the herd immunity, so what we have here, the herd immunity, that is holds no longer true, and it's kind of disappearing. So let's take a look at the next slide. So the virus is classified in group 1 of with the double-stranded DNA viruses. It's the family of the pox viridae. The species, the vaccinia virus, and the species that makes you sick is the variola virus. Here is a child in Bangladesh that has the disease, and you can see the skin lesions that it causes. The virus, the shape is dumbbell shape, so it's like, looks like a little workout tool. See that right here? So right here, that's the DNA. And this one would be an electron micrograph. So here's some additional information about smallpox. There's always been that fear that it could be used as a terrorist weapon. It's possible because people are no longer immune to the disease. The U.S. quit the immunization programs in 1972 because there were quite a few people that did have reactions to the vaccination. And you do need a booster about every 10 years to maintain the immunity. So the vaccine can cause reactions, and it can kill. It's about 1 in a million vaccinees that would have a reaction to it, and it could potentially kill you. The vaccine production ended in 1980, but considering how deadly this virus is, so a fatality rate in some places approaching 50%, on average about 30%, that vaccination was much needed, and it saved millions of people. Here are some statistics. This virus killed about 300 million people in the 20th century. And so this virus is deadly, and hopefully nobody pulls this virus out of their labs and lets it loose on humanity anymore. It's highly contagious, direct contact, even indirect contact to fomites, you could get it. So a little bit more here for your pathogen sheet for the profile of this virus. The incubation period, about 12 to 14 days. First symptoms include a high fever, headache, backache. Prostration means you feel terrible. You just feel absolutely out of it. And then sometimes abdominal pain. So on day 16 or 17, you're going to end up with a rash on face and arms, legs. They turn into small pustules that became blisters and then crust over. After 3 weeks, so in the 4th week, so day 21 to 28, the scabs develop and they fall off if the person survives. There's no cure once you start. Once you have symptoms, you just have to rely on your immune system. You can try to vaccinate somebody up to 4 days after exposure, and that might be able to reduce the severity of the symptoms. Now let's move on to rubeola virus. That is the virus that causes measles. Rubeola virus is a single-stranded RNA virus with envelope. It's in the family of the Paramyxoviridae, and you see this kid here with the typical rash. Some people have it more severe than others, but let's take a look at the symptoms of measles. So we have the typical symptoms include skin rash and then something called Koplik spots. I'll show you a picture on that. Conjunctivitis, runny nose, cough. That's more like sort of this cold flu-like symptoms. And they disappear in this range of from about 10 to 20 days. And again, some people have it much more severe than others. The conjunctivitis is pretty typical. You have people that have measles. They typically want to be in a dark room. They really don't want to open their eyes even if it hurts. So here are the Koplik spots. What you want to look for is these white spots right here. These are Koplik spots inside the mouth. They appear. And that is one of the very characteristic symptoms of measles. The rash goes anywhere from a few days to can last even a couple of weeks. The cough, conjunctivitis, very typical, but the severity, again, it varies from person to person. There is a risk of encephalitis, and that could be deadly. So here, let's take a look at the measles pathogenesis, so the disease progression. The measles has about a 10-day incubation period, so that's what you have up here, the incubation period. And then here's the disease period. While you're incubating the virus, the virus will grow in your various tissues and multiply. And the problem is, a lot of times, before you even have any symptoms, you're already infectious. So the infectious period starts before you have symptoms, and that is bad because you can spread the disease very easily. And then once the disease starts and you have symptoms, then you're going to have the Koplik spots, the rash, respiratory symptoms, the cough, sneezing, runny nose, and eventually, after about 2 weeks, you should be getting better, and your the virus in your body should go down. Measles has been going down in the United States. It was a very common childhood disease before the vaccination was started. And then you can see the drastic reduction in cases as soon as the vaccine is licensed. So vaccine license, and boom, we're going down in case numbers. That's how successful these vaccination programs are. Measles vaccine is part of the MMR vaccine. Children should get 2 doses of it. Just here a little bit more on the measles outbreaks that you may have heard about. There was one in 2014. So here a little bit of epidemiology. The vaccination program, as I said, was very successful, and for years you wouldn't hear anything about measles cases. And then all of a sudden there was an outbreak in Disneyland a few years ago. And so here still the case number is not that much, 70, but they were warning about it. Here, Ohio, 382 cases. So there was sort of a spike. So that would be considered an epidemic, since a sudden spike in cases. That's the definition for epidemic. Our next virus is the rubella virus, also known as German measles. That one is also part of the MMR vaccination. It doesn't usually cause a big problem in the person that's infected. A lot of people are even symptom-free. They have nothing. Some people have a mild rash. It's not a problem for the person that contracts the disease, typically, but it is a problem for pregnant women, and that's what's known as congenital defects. So in pregnant women, it can cause damage to the developing embryo fetus. So the rubella virus is a single-stranded RNA virus with envelope. It's in the family of the Togaviridae. The symptoms of rubella include rash, fever, arthralgia, that means your joints are hurting, lymphadenopathy, you might have some swollen lymph nodes, and conjunctivitis. But as I said, most people have mild symptoms. The problem comes in when a woman has rubella during pregnancy. That can lead to something known as congenital rubella in the baby. And that could have the following symptoms: cataracts, glaucoma, so that'd be problems with the eyes, heart defects, hearing loss, retinopathy, mental retardation, and it's really a problem. So here are 2 babies with congenital rubella. You can see this baby up here has problems. There's all over the skin, these spots right there. Or take a look at this baby here, the eye problems right here. Next virus is the mumps virus, and that's the 3rd one in the MMR, mumps, measles, rubella vaccination. This virus is a single-stranded RNA virus with envelope. It's in the family of the Paramyxoviridae, and this one, the very typical symptom is that your parotid glands, the salivary glands, are swollen. You kind of look like a chipmunk, and it does hurt too. In some people, it can cause problems with the gonads, and it can lead to sterility in some. The vaccine, again, that's the MMR vaccine that children are supposed to get 2 doses of. So here's a child with mumps. You can see how the parotid gland is massively swollen right in this area right here. So you don't hear too much about mumps cases right now. The vaccination program, again, was very successful. So let's move on to the hepatitis viruses. And here we're going to start out with hepatitis A virus. That's a single-stranded RNA virus with no envelope. It's in the family of the Picornaviridae. Well, the transmission is usually through water, so they call it fecal-oral. Usually contaminated water is the transmission route, and it circulates sometimes to the homeless population. There was recently an outbreak in San Diego among the homeless population there. But there is a vaccine available, and so they actually rushed all the homeless people that were exposed to get vaccinated. The disease progression includes jaundice, so the liver is, of course, not working right, and then a rash that starts appearing. And here, let's take a look at some of the hepatitis facts. So we have, of course, the problems with the liver inflammation, and some people also have nausea, vomiting, and the virus is spread